The little puppy snuggled up to his sister. It was very cold in the box, but he didn't yet know that his sister didn't care anymore. The puppy didn't know that the person who had torn them away from their mother a few hours ago and put them in the box had thrown the pups on the road in some godforsaken place. The person didn't even think about their future, whether they would be found alive or not. His favorite purebred Alibi dog had given birth to these two puppies. A couple of months ago, she had run away from home, joined a pack of stray dogs, and roamed the county with them, inhaling the intoxicating air of freedom until she was caught by her owner. When the puppies grew a little, the owner carelessly put them in a box and took them to the nearest town center, which bleakly stretched along the highway. Why he didn't drown them right away, dooming them to a torturous death, only God knew. But some higher powers intervened, giving the little creature a chance at salvation. The janitor Macario drearily trudged home from the kiosk, a bottle of alcohol sticking out of his right pocket. Today was cold, he was freezing to the bone, and he wanted to warm up as soon as possible. And then there was a box in his path. Macario absent-mindedly kicked it, and he heard some squeaking from inside. Wow, what a surprise, Macario thought as he picked up the puppy. I'll give it to my wife. Today is her birthday, and we don't have money for a gift. They argued for a long time in the smoke-filled kitchen over a bottle of vodka about what to name the puppy. Macario suggested something ordinary, like Simba or Diego. His wife insisted on a beautiful and exotic name like Mason. Maybe she thought she looked like someone from Santa Barbara. Well, it's your birthday today, Macario said, let it be your way. So the puppy became Mason, although it didn't bring him any happiness. His life was not sweet, not at all like that of foreign dogs. It was as if someone was testing him, sending him new and new trials. Macario lived in an old shack, drafty and near the highway. He inherited this house and it stood at the very edge of their little backwater town, so their drunken quarrels didn't bother anyone. There were no neighbors nearby. Mason was often punished for puddles when he was a puppy, for ruined furniture and shoes, and sometimes Macario could just hit him in the stomach because Mason got in his way. The owner also didn't like the puppy and never defended him from her drunk husband. From a small fluffy creature, he turned into an awkward teenager, and then into a tall, sturdy dog. His fur was an incredibly unusual color, like his mother's, a white with some soft pink hue. In the evenings, Mason would look at the lit windows of the houses and think. He couldn't understand why he was born and lived on this earth if he was not needed by anyone. And he dreamed of having his own warm home and a kind owner, and he would be a faithful friend to him. They could walk in the park for a long time, and then come home and have warm porridge with pieces of meat. That's what Mason thought, lying on the cold floor of the unheated stove and an empty bowl. When it became too much for him from the drunken binges of the owners, he would go to the highway and sit there for a long time, staring at the passing cars. It seemed to him that any moment a car would stop and kind hands would take him away from here to a new home. Home. What a warm and cozy word it was. Unexpectedly for the young dog, the house became quiet one day. The owner stopped drinking, and Macario would sit alone in the kitchen for a long time with a glass. There was no one to quarrel with anymore, and he, having reached the bottom of the bottle, would go to sleep. Mason couldn't understand what was happening at first, but the growing belly of the owner put everything in its place. For several months, peace and quiet settled in the house, and Mason even thought that his most cherished dreams were coming true. But the dog's happiness didn't last long. One day, they brought a baby wrapped in a woolen blanket into the house. The pink bundle smelled deliciously of milk, and Mason even felt like licking it. He immediately fell in love with the little human. But why did they need a baby? What would they do with him? Worry settled in the dog's soul. And soon his fears were justified. The owner was not handling the role of mother well. Everything fell on her at once: feeding on schedule, sleepless nights, dirty diapers. A baby is not like a puppy that you can push away and ignore. And after a couple of months, he and Macario started sitting together with a bottle on the smoky kitchen table again. Only now, there were two living, unwanted beings suffering in the house, devoid of maternal love. Mason felt sorry for the baby. During long, cold, lonely evenings and nights, he climbed into the baby's crib and warmed the baby with his own body heat, falling asleep next to him. That night, after a drunken quarrel, the sorrowful parents went to their bedroom to sleep. They fell asleep, closing themselves off in the bedroom, ignoring the persistent cries of the baby, tightly wrapped in a blanket. He was hungry, but the mother didn't care. She fell asleep in front of the TV, and Macario collapsed into a nearby armchair and passed out. An unextinguished cigarette smoldered in his hand. The acrid smoke was already spreading across the floor, slowly filling the master bedroom. Something prevented Mason from falling asleep and troubled him more and more. The genes inherited from countless generations of stray dogs were pounding in his head. Run away. I have to run away from here urgently. He got up and headed for the door. As usual, it was unlocked. I'll leave forever and never come back to this damned house and this cursed life, the dog decided once and for all. But what about the baby? No, he couldn't leave the baby in this place. It was the only creature on earth that Mason loved. So, we'll leave together. And then the baby, lying in his room in his crib, stirred in his sleep and whimpered. The parents, as always, ignored his crying. Mason pulled the baby out of the crib, carefully grabbed the bundle with his teeth, and dragged the baby to the door. Carrying his most precious cargo in his mouth, the dog headed for the highway. Only there could he find salvation for himself and the baby. At least that's what he thought. Daniela was returning to town from her parents, whom she visited once a month. Just a couple more towns, and she'd be home. And there her beloved husband was waiting for her. Suddenly, she saw something white on the roadside in the headlights. Right on the road, it looked like something was lying there. She braked and stopped the car. Daniela stared into the darkness and couldn't believe her eyes. About 20 meters ahead, there really was a little bundle resembling a pile of tightly wrapped sheets. And next to it sat a huge dog trembling with cold and fear. Oh my God! Daniela murmured, and, approaching closer, she fell to her knees right on the ground. She peeked into what was wrapped in the sheets. She saw the little wrinkled face of a baby trying to cry. My God, it's a baby! The girl whispered. How did he end up here? Although she was used to such twists of fate. The girl worked in the authorities, in the department for minors, and saw all sorts of things. She picked up the baby and rushed to the car. They had to get to town as soon as possible and help the baby. Daniela had already driven a few hundred meters when she suddenly remembered the dog. The dog was slowly walking along the roadside toward town, away from his former life. Suddenly, the car with the baby backed up and stopped next to Mason. The door swung open. At first, the dog didn't even understand that he was being invited to sit in the back seat. Daniela got out of the car and approached Mason. Kind, warm hands gently stroked his ear. Come on, let's go. Let's go home, little one. The dog heard the cherished word. Home. How long he had dreamed of hearing it. The car sped down the highway faster and faster. Mason pressed himself against the sleeping baby with his whole body and fell asleep to the quiet rustling of the wheels. Everything was just like in his dreams. He dreamed of a home, kind eyes of the girl, her warm hands, sparkling eyes, and a bowl of warm porridge with meat. They were going home with the baby. And Daniela was thinking about how she would definitely adopt this foundling. After all, he met her on the road for a reason.